welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. I'm Christy Branham.
And I'm Monica Healy.
Today, we are joined by one of the most dynamic and groundbreaking voices in Minnesota politics. Senator Zaynab Mohamed represents District 63 and made history in 2022 as the youngest person ever elected to the Minnesota Senate, the first Somali woman and one of the first 3 Black women to serve in the chamber. She was elected with more votes than any other state senator that year, and she has wasted no time in making an impact.
In her first term, Senator Mohamed has helped guarantee reproductive freedom for Minnesotans and played a key role in passing a nation-leading paid leave program. She's also been a strong advocate for immigrant communities, working to expand access to driver's licenses and affordable health care, regardless of immigration status. She currently serves as co-chair of the Senate Working Group on Gun Violence Protection, vice chair of the Jobs and Economic Development Committee, and chair of the POCI caucus.
Beyond policy, Senator Mohamed has built a reputation for showing up, whether that's supporting families during Operation Metro Surge, standing with communities after tragedy, or responding in real time when Minnesotans are in crisis. Senator Mohamed, we are so honored to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be here with you guys.
But Christy and I are moms. Between the two of us, we are moms of 6 Gen Z kids.
Yeah. And just to see all the amazing things you're doing at such a young age, your career is going to be phenomenal. So we're excited for you. Now, you made history in several ways when you were elected, but I'd love to start with what motivated you personally to run for office at such a young age. And what was the moment where you decided to step into this space?
So, well, thanks for having me. I first ran in 2021, and it was a year after George Floyd had been murdered in our city, after we had gone through the uprising of that, the year where we were trying to navigate what life is going to look like post-pandemic. And at the time, my senator retired, and she held the seat for 16 years prior to me, and she was the first Latina elected to the Senate. And I had a conversation with her where she felt really fed up with the dynamics of the Senate, of the legislature, the fact that she felt like she couldn't get anything done for people, especially for the businesses on Lake Street that had just dealt with uprising, for the people in our communities who have been patrolling and protecting each other. And she was like, I think you'd be a great candidate. You've been organizing. I have, at that point, had worked for community organizations. I had worked at city halls. I've done a ton of organizing, and she felt like I was the right person. And I thought a lot about it. And I was 24, right, a few years after college. I mean, what else is a girl going to do besides run for the Senate? And so
That's so great.
That's awesome.
You've often described as a part of a new generation of leadership. And what does being a Gen Z legislator actually change about how you approach governing? What do you think people misunderstand about the Gen Z generation?
Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting? People often in politics talk a lot about young people and Gen Z and the generation after them, or social media kids or online kids. But I think what is really profound about people in my generation is the fact that they live with such urgency in their lives, and they demand so much from government. And I think when people who are older than myself in school, they were studying the student debts or the climate crisis, we're living through those crises. And so we have a lot more expectations from people who are in positions of power. We don't want you to talk about student debt. We want you to do something about it. We don't want you to talk about climate change. We're living and experiencing it every day. We want you to do something. And so there's a level of urgency from this generation, and they also have a lot more accountability for their elected officials. They're not willing to put up with any BS. They expect the highest level of service from people who are elected, and they want them to meet the moment, and they don't want them to do stuff behind closed doors. They want to be able to see that, and they want their elected officials to show it, whether it's online or social media or in real life. And they also, we're a generation where organizing is such a real part of our lives, whether it's online organizing and talking to your friends or meeting friends on social media and constantly organizing and doing things. And I think a lot of times people who, at least in my body in the Senate, have been in the Senate for 10, 15, 20, 30, some 40 years. they don't even know what organizing is. And like, that's what I have done my whole life. That's what people in my work do all the time. And so when I talk to people who are elected with me, they're like, why are you always working? I'm like, I'm just organizing for my votes. I'm trying to see if I can get 34 on this issue, if I can do this, or what it would take for you to vote for it. And that means I have to talk to people in your community, or, you know, create a hazard for you online or some stuff. And so I think people in my generation, to like sum it up, they expect more from government. They want more because they're living through the crises that elected officials have talked about for generations, and they're fed up with it.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I think we have seen that in your generation and how they have come out and mobilized and organized, and you are living it. And the younger generation is the first generation in time immemorial that is slated to have a lower standard of living than the generation before them. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
And I think what you said just highlighted what's exceptionally dysfunctional in the federal government right now. Just you saying you're going out to figure out if you have enough votes or what it's going to take to get your vote to pass this one bill. That's not happening right now in Congress. And I think part of that is because it is the old guard that's there. There's not a lot of young people in Congress. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be interviewing a couple of younger people who are running for seats in Congress. And I think your generation is really going to be pivotal in changing the way things are done in government, because this is a case of we've always done it like this, and it's time to shake things up. Our lives have changed, and it's time to approach things from a different angle.
Yeah, I feel like we're so used to people who tell us, I will work for you and I will run on these issues if you elect me. And they come back 4 years or 2 years later and they say the same thing over and over and over again. And I think people in our communities, like my parents are like, oh, like they said they're going to work on that. I'm like, but they haven't. Like if they have you seen results? Because I haven't seen anything move. And I think it's like the generations older than me are so okay with like incremental movements. And I am not. Like I want things to move. I want you to shift. These issues exist because people created them, so solve them. And I think we can do it. I think we just need to have the political want and the urgency to be able to do it.
And I think we are seeing the urgency right now. And that's exactly why your generation is pushing back on it, because we are embroiled in like our hair is on fire and we need to do something about it.
Senator, you've taken a leadership role on gun violence prevention, including work on legislation to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. What does that work look like behind the scenes, and why is this issue such a priority for you in Minnesota?
It's a priority for people in my district and people in the state for a number of reasons. Number one, I think we've lived through this past year has been one full of violence for the people of our state, whether it's living through the political assassination of Melissa Fortman and her husband and their dog, or Annunciation, which is school and church mass shooting, which is in my district, and the people of that community having to deal with the loss of Fletcher and Harper and 20, almost 30 other people getting shot, or Alex Preddy. Like all of these things are like different issues, but the ultimate, I think the thing that they have all in common is there's so much violence in our communities. Violence is to gun violence. And it's been happening for decades. I think I describe it as the issue of my generation. And, you know, my generation is the first in our lifetime to live through having to go to school and deal with school drills in the case that somebody comes in and shoots at kids. And what does it look like to keep yourself and your classmates and your teachers safe? And I think that's not normal. And very often people who are in local, state, federal governments in office or have power have never lived through that. They've never had to sit through a classroom and wonder where to hide, what would it look like, and play this sick game of imagination. And, you know, when Annunciation happened, it was a little over a month after we went through the political assassination of our colleagues. And I was a part of that list of people who was named. And, you know, I came with our colleagues and I'm like, we have to do something. We ought to do something and we have to act. And so we put together a work group on gun violence prevention. And it was myself and a few others, including the chair of the committee, Ron Latz, and we co-chaired it. And we heard directly from the families at Annunciation. They came and they told their stories. And we heard from providers, the healthcare providers who took care of those kids, We heard from law enforcement. We heard from the Catholic community because it's a Catholic school. Just the numerous of communities. And the goal of that for me was set the stage for this session, was so their stories would not just be another headline and then we move on. I think the family of Herbert and the families of Fletcher don't get to think of their child as just a headline. Their child is gone for the rest of their lives. And us as elected officials have an obligation to act, to do something. And the principal of that school, right after the shooting, did a press conference where he quoted a African proverb that said, "Move your feet." He's like, just move your feet and do something, take action. And that work group for me was like my moment of wanting to take action, do something when we weren't in session. And so at the beginning of this session, I introduced a bill to ban assault weapons in high capacity magazines in the state of Minnesota. It has been a contentious issue, handful of stories, I tell you. People,
I bet Minnesotan Republicans love their guns.
You'd be surprised. Some Democrats too, I must say.
Yeah.
Which is okay, right? Like, I think I actually don't have a problem with people who love their guns. I do have a problem with people not understanding that certain weapons just do not belong in our communities and that people shouldn't have access to them. That a weapon that can shoot 120 rounds, 116 rounds under 2 minutes in a school is not a normal gun, nor is it the type of gun that you go hunting with. So, like, let's protect what you go hunting with, but let's take away the ones that are really harmful and that create dangers to our communities, the ones that have been used by the worst perpetrators of mass shootings in the history of this country. And so, we bring the stats of every mass shooting that's happened over the last 10 years, the type of gun that was used, that there's a common denominator. We talk about the stories. We talk about that it's a public health issue. We had our first hearing of the bill in Judiciary and Public Safety Committee like 3 weeks ago, and it passed for the first time. That's never happened in the state Senate. And so now the bill is headed to finance, and then it has to get to the Senate floor, and then we'll see with the House. The House did take up like a technical sort of thing where they wanted to pull the bill from committee to the floor, and that failed on 67 vote, which is to be expected because they are in a divided government. But I do think like we very often think about like the gun violence issue and the gun policy as like a democratic issue, and it's not. Like, we did a polling across the state of Minnesota, and 69% of Minnesotans support it. Minnesota is a purple state for the most part. It's not a very democratic state. We have the tightest legislature in the country. And so you have Republicans who support this issue and independents and Democrats because they are ethical hunters and people who understand what weapons should be used when people are going hunting, what it means for those people to maintain their culture, but also like certain weapons just don't belong to our communities. Those are the conversations we're having close doors.
And you already kind of addressed my next question, which was about the Second Amendment and how you assure people that you're not trying to revoke the Second Amendment. And the conversation about the types of guns, I think, is key. And it's one that too many Republicans, they're not willing to have that conversation. And it sounds like Minnesotans are more willing to have that conversation.
The bill on ban assault weapons in high-capacity magazines is a bipartisan issue across the state of Minnesota. It's only partisan in the legislature because of the people who serve it, who serve in that body. And I will also say, like, that's always the argument, that you're taking away people's Second Amendment. And I think that's an insult to the people in our state because they understand that I can't change the Constitution of the United States of America. I am a state senator.
Right.
I cannot. But I can ban on assault weapons, and over 10 other states have done it across the state, across the country. And we had this ban, by the way, in the 90s. And mass shooting statistically went down when we did have this ban at the federal level. So, like, we should fight for it at the federal level, and we should ban it across the country, across the country in the U.S. But I think it's an insult to the people in our states to make them think that they can't understand how the laws in our country work.
Yeah, and I think people don't understand that when our forefathers drafted the Constitution, it literally took 2.5 to 3 minutes to load a gun for a single shot, right? Because they were back then, they would have to put in the gunpowder and they'd have to tamp it down. It was a long process for them to load the gun to get one shot off. They could only get, I think they said they could only get one shot out every 4 minutes if they were fast. to be able to reload their guns.
Not to mention the fact that the amendment specifically talks about a regulated militia. It wasn't meant
Right.
to be citizens across the board.
Right.
It wasn't an entire industry. It wasn't an entire industry. We have, a pharmaceutical industry that controls healthcare prices or the prices of prescription in our country. We also have the NRA and an entire industry that controls how many guns they want to put out into our streets. And it's not based on to keep you or yourself, your community safe. It's so that they can sell as many as they can and keep getting richer. And I think that's unacceptable. And I think we should talk about it as well and say the NRA is benefiting unequivocally. In the state of Minnesota,
Absolutely.
the NRA is not even a big, lobbying group. But this year, they are here in full force. They are lobbying. They are sending thousands of letters. And it's because, they want to keep selling these types of guns because they benefit the most from it because they make the most money from it.
Well, ironically, after mass shootings, that is when gun sales go up because there is this panic amongst gun owners that there will be legislation passed that will restrict their gun ownership. So instead of having the effect that you would think it would after a mass shooting that gun sales drop, it's the exact opposite.
Unfortunately, money talks. So that leads us to our next question, which is about fraud in Minnesota. Fraud in Minnesota programs has been a major issue and a concern across the political spectrum. From your perspective, where did the system fail and what needs to be changed?
So fraud is a real issue. It's not one that we can look away and say it isn't happening because it is. It's also true that it's been happening for decades. It's also true that there was an independent audit that was done by Tim O'Malley, who was appointed by Governor Tim Walz, but prior to that worked under the Tim Pawlenty administration. So he worked under both a Republican and Democratic administration. But this sort of report he did was to audit the state's finances in our agencies, and to also understand how long fraud has been happening. And turns out it's been happening since the 70s. And it's caused by many things. It's a ripple effect, right? When it comes to the Department of Human Services, DHS, which is often what they talk about, it's our Health and Human Services. It's where it's the agency where the work of taking care of the most vulnerable people in our community sit, whether it's disabled people, whether it's folks with autism, whether it's folks who have had accidents and can't physically take care of themselves. I mean, you think of the people who are most struggling, seniors, poor people, we take care of them through our health and human services. And I think because it's been happening over the decades, nobody has fully paid attention to it. So it didn't just start during the pandemic, and it didn't just start under Tim Walz. It was happening under Pawlenty, under every other administration you could think of. I think over the years, the agencies have gotten so big. And what's happened was we haven't had the time to think about how do we make sure that the services that we're providing are good quality care for people and that people are actually receiving those services. What's actually happened in the government is very often our agencies outsource the care to different entities, whether it's small businesses, LLCs, whether it's to the counties. I mean, we outsource every sort of program, which I fundamentally disagree with. I think if we did the work ourselves as an agency, yes, our agency would be humongous and might cost us a lot more of admin money, but we would also know where fraud is happening and how it's happening and how and why and how we can tackle it. Right now, what's happened this year is it's become, this past 2 years, very political thing for the Republican Party, and they want to talk about it from that place, right? They want to say Democrats are allowing fraud in the state of Minnesota and it's their fault. That's not it. That's just factually not correct. Fraud is happening, yes, in Minnesota. It's also happening in New York. It's happening in Florida. It's happening in the federal government. It's happening across the country, across all of our systems, and we should solve it. And how do we solve it? We should not be talking about fraud after the fact that it happens. We should prosecute the people who commit these crimes. And we should also figure out from the beginning point, who are we giving this money to? Are they providing the care that they need? And as a business, Are they getting the training that they need to follow the laws of the states? And if they are not, what can we do to make sure that they are? Or what can we do to make sure that another entity takes that over? That's the conversation we're having right now in our bodies. And so I've introduced a number of bills, and my bills focus on solving fraud before we get to the point of, well, it happened. How do we close the loopholes? How do we make sure when an entity wants to, for example, when it wants to take care of seniors? Okay, we're going to give you money to do this, and you're going to bill for this client. Let's make sure that you understand the laws. Let's make sure you have proper training. And let's also make sure that throughout that time that the agency comes and visits your site anonymously without you knowing. They will come 3 times a year because your stuff should always be clean, should always be good. But we have very often, as a government, given money to the service and then less money to the administrative work. And so the agency very often is very overwhelmed and doesn't have enough money to put towards putting people in boots on the ground. And then you have fraudsters and criminals who take advantage of the system. I don't know if I broke that down well.
I think you did.
And you mentioned, getting services to the people that need it. And I think that's the problem that we have seen from the federal government is they see fraud and then they're just stopping payment and services. And then that leaves our vulnerable communities at risk and they're not getting the services that they need. So again, I think you hit the nail on the head where you are addressing the fraud and the people that are perpetrating the fraud and not the people that are supposed to be getting the services.
Yeah. And, I sit on the committee of Health and Human Services, and very often people compare the fraud that's happening there to Feeding Our Future, which is fundamentally different because both of that funding sits in different committees and agencies, and Health and Human Services is often most of the time Medicaid dollars, meaning there's OIG and a federal government that is connected to that is also responsible for holding those folks accountable. I think what I feel most hopeful about in this issue is I have done my best to not make it political, but to break it down and then figure out where I can take on and where I can solve the issue. And the 3 bills that I introduced in our committee have passed, and were passed with both Republican and Democrats, and I have co-authors from both sides. So I think people have an understanding. I just wish it was less political and we weren't blaming on one group, because if this was a different administration, same thing would be happening.
Agreed. And the fact that it has been made basically a political flashpoint, right? This is a talking point, a red herring for the Republicans to be able to give some red meat to their voters, right?
Yeah.
And in Minnesota, it basically turned into the Minnesota version of they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs.
Yep. Why not? I think what this federal government has always done in this specific administration under Trump is they are very good at taking the most minority group in a community and making them the enemy. And so in Ohio, it's the Haitian community is a very tiny population. So why not make it? In Minnesota, sure, it feels like there's a lot of Somali people in the state of Minnesota, about 80,000, but there's 80,000 Minnesotans. And then across the country, less than 150,000. So in population wise, this is a tiny, tiny community. And few folks in that community, under 100 people, have committed crimes. Okay. And so why not take this massive issue that is a systematic failure and blame it on this community? And then now everybody is going to say, get that out of our country or out of our state.
Right.
But they benefit from pitting communities against each other. They benefit from hate. They benefit from making people feel so marginalized. I think the goal for them is for people in my community to feel like, I don't even want to vote. I didn't want anything to do with this. I'm just going to stay at home. They will benefit from that. I think for me and people in my community, our goal is to teach them that's what they want you to do. They want you to feel demoralized, to not feel supported, to not feel like people have your back. And I think the Democratic Party is starting to get a hold of it, but they need to understand that that's their goal, is to make minorities feel so demoralized that they don't vote.
And in Minnesota, Somalis fill so many important jobs, especially in the healthcare community. If there were a mass exodus of Somalis from the state for any reason, the healthcare system here would fall apart because it's not uncommon for you to go into a doctor's office and have your nurse be a Somali. I've had a Somali doctor. There are nursing assistants, CNAs, quite a few CNAs are from that community.
Lots in the
So all
education
these,
system.
exactly. And, to lose that foundation would be horrific for Minnesota as
Yeah.
a state.
And,
So,
if somebody hasn't often interacted with the community and what they know about them is what they see on TV, they obviously have preconceived notion of who that community is, which is often wrong. When I got elected, the first bill that I carried was driver's licenses, which would allow undocumented people in our state to be able to have the privilege to drive. Because it's a law we used to have 20 years ago, and it was revoked by the Tim Pawlenty administration. And I thought it was a good idea for us to allow our communities to drive and for them not to be afraid. I had the Chamber of Commerce and the business community supporting it. I had the MPPOA and law enforcement supporting it. I had the faith community supporting it. Across the legislature, this was the one issue that people who will never agree on an issue came together and supported. And my colleague Grant Hochschild, who's a senator from around the Iron Range, northern Minnesota, read a letter which was given to me my first day in the legislature when I introduced the bill. Somebody came to me and they said, I'm from northern Minnesota. I want to just leave you this letter. And it was from this guy named Tom Rukavina. And he was a former, I'm saying his name wrong, I'm sure, but he was a former state senator. And in the past, I believe he voted against undocumented bills for undocumented communities, specifically driver's licenses. And when he was in his, I think, nursing bed, he wrote this opinion piece to his local news, an open op-ed, where he talks about how, like, even in his sickest days, it's immigrants who are showing up for him, who are taking care of him, and that
right.
our state should do more and take care of them. And Grant read that at like 2 a.m. and it just like put me to tears. And I think what I have learned over the last 4 years being in this job is like people really don't really reflect around issues around them unless it comes to their front steps, right? Like for
Exactly.
him,
Yes.
he had to be in his nursing bed. And I think it's courageous that he did that. I think it's profound that
Yes.
still did that, and I think it like moved a lot of votes for me, and I'm grateful for it. But I just think about
Yeah.
what the people right now who are governing are gonna do when they're 80, 90, or at that bets, and whether they will have any regrets.
Yeah.
I think the sooner
Yeah.
people realize that it's less of an issue of left versus right and top versus bottom, and collectively humanity just needs to take care of each other, and
Yes.
we all need to learn
Yes,
that.
for sure. Senator, you've been described as someone who consistently shows up for the community, especially in moments of crisis. And what does that actually look like in practice, that showing up? And how do you stay connected with the people you represent while serving at the Capitol?
That's a really good question. I think it ties to our initial question when we started, which was like, why is your generation so different? I think I expected more from my elected officials, and so I do more because that's how I would want somebody who was my elected official to show up. And so when the federal government decided that they were going to occupy our state and ICE was going to be sent here in thousands, what I quickly realized was that people in our communities weren't going to work, weren't paying for rent, weren't getting groceries. And so I started to sort of do these video updating people on daily what's happening on the ground, how ICE is terrorizing our communities. But I also wanted it to be an opportunity for us to come together as a community and do something collectively because my powers were limited. There's really nothing I can do, but I can be in our community and I can connect to people and I can organize. And so I started to do these mini food drives, and it was like my way of saying we're going to do it block to block. And it really did turn into that. Like it went from block to like few hundred. And we started doing it in schools, in their gyms. And it was like, before you know it, we had thousands of people signing up for our link tree to deliver food. And then we had thousands of people wanting to like start rental assistance for their communities and like help pay rent for their neighbors. And then we had hundreds of people who were saying, we won't do patrolling because we want to make sure if we're going to go deliver food, we're safe. And so we started to create this system within our community, and it's kind of become its own thing, which is, I think, incredible. But I think in the beginning days, we had people just felt really like hopeless. What can we do? What can we do? And I was just directing people. We're doing a food drive, show up, bring these items. And then I would hear from educators in our school or parents who will say, this is how many parents are missing in our school. This is how many kids are missing in our school. Like, we think these are the people who aren't going to work. Can you help us come up with these things? And they would connect. So it was like, I think what I learned is like, government really doesn't really do much for people. It's the people who do the work. It's the people who show up for each other. When these systems fail, like, we're the ones who keep each other safe. They are keeping their neighbors who are undocumented safe. They are making sure those who are immigrants who don't want to be interacting with ICE don't go out there and do that. They're making sure that they are fed, that they have food, that their rent is paid. And like, sometimes I'm in awe of the work that we have done, but you know, I don't think I'm anything other than just an ordinary person wanting to do what I would want done for me, what I would want done for my neighbors. I just have somewhat of a bigger platform than my regular neighbor. So why not use that platform and connect to people? And so that's what I decided to do. And I think I'm proud of the work we've done. I hope that we stay with it. I think with every sort of like struggle we have in the States, whether it's the pandemic or the uprising or the assassinations or ICE, and the occupation of our state, like, this is the wrong state to test your bad policies on. This is the wrong people to
100%.
try to like turn their neighbors against. Like, you're just making our communities just love each other and show up for each other. So like, I guess thank you. Yeah.
Minnesota has definitely shown up. And I think you are exactly right about it is the people that are really the ones that are taking care of each other. And we have shown that time and time again. And who keeps us safe? We keep us safe.
Yep.
And that word neighborism, we just had Kelly on our podcast a couple weeks ago from Do-Gooders, and we talked about the concept of neighborism and showing up for your neighbors and doing what you can with what you have for your neighbors, because that's what we do here in Minnesota. That's part of our culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think there's a single day I shoveled my soul this year. Like, I wake up, I'm ready to do it. And somebody who's already done it, and I'm so grateful. I'm like, it's my least favorite thing. You know, like, I think people just do little things that make people's lives easier. Like, you go through a drive-thru and somebody's already paid for your coffee or your meal. Like, that's Minnesota to a T. And I think this is the wrong state to test wrong people.
Yeah. We generally swear we're trying to be respectful.
No, I swear too, so that makes me feel a little better. Because I have a potty mouth. We're pretty sweary. Okay.
Well, generally at this point, I would have said, like, don't fuck with Minnesota.
Do not fuck with Minnesota.
Amen.
Amen, sister. So
we are very proud of how Minnesota has shown up always, but in particular these last 4 months. And I've had people from other states, you know, where ICE is planning on going and say, how can we replicate what Minnesota has done? And my answer is, I don't know that any individual can. It's got to come from the people.
right.
People, we hope that you have similar people and like humanity as we do.
Yeah.
Way to go, Minnesota.
Yeah, and like Kelly said, you know, trying to replicate this in other states and other cities, it can't happen exactly like it did here because our culture is different. Like, you have to find where the connection is in your culture.
Yep.
From within that city and leverage that. And that is how you replicate it. It won't be exactly the same as in Minnesota because Portland was certainly different and Chicago was certainly different and LA was certainly different. But the other thing is we all learn from each other too on how to show up for each other and what things could possibly happen and being prepared for the things that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Bovino literally said on the news that this has been the hardest state that they had to deal with, where they have been the least successful.
Fuck yeah.
Like, you know,
Because we weren't going to take it.
we were not. It's like, fuck no. But also, like, I think it's a testament to the trauma we have been through collectively as a community. I mean, like, what we have gone through in the last 4 or 5 years since 2020 is not normal. Like, we have collective trauma. And I don't even think all the insurance companies in the world can cover our therapy appointments. But like, I think we have taken and put what we're feeling in those moments and our own struggles aside to just do and show up and put one foot in front of the other. And then you have people be like, how are you? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you drinking water? And I'm like, we're all struggling. Like, we are really all in this. But like, you know, like, because we went through COVID, because we went through an uprising, because we went through the assassination of our leaders, because we went through all these things, we were not about to let Bavina fuck with us. Like, That was
No,
not about to happen here. Little Bavino
no,
was not about to do anything here. So, like, yeah.
absolutely.
Very proud of
And
Minnesota.
yeah, and just to be very clear, things have not stopped here in Minnesota. It's just a lot less visible. They're being a lot more
Their tactics
covert.
have changed.
Their tactics have changed and they're wearing plain clothes. They're using members of minority communities to
Yeah.
go to lure people out of homes so that there's a sense of safety. They're still at
Yeah.
schools. They're still in the community. I mean, and the sad thing is they've moved out state. I think they're not quite as active in the city. They're still here, obviously.
Yeah.
But they've moved out state where there's less resistance or less organized resistance.
Fewer
Yeah.
Than there is
observers.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might not be sending a white masked man to your door, but they will send a nice Latino man, a nice Somali man who's not masked to make you feel like this is a normal person who wants to have a conversation with you and then abduct. They're just using different
Yeah.
tactics.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say this. I have a huge issue with people who are Latino, who are Somali, working for ICE and using intimidation tactics and doing basically inhumane things to members of their own community. Like, where is the compassion there? It befuddles me. It absolutely befuddles me.
I mean, I think that no community is perfect, right? No community is I will say when I really think about that deeply, like, why would somebody from our own community do this to members of our own community? I just also think about the struggles people are facing economically. And like, for somebody who lost their job who has nothing, you offered them a $50,000 bonus. Like, that is life-changing for them.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
think that just shows over the decades how much we have failed the people of our state and how much this issue ultimately is always what it is, which is top versus bottom.
Yeah,
it is
absolutely.
People, it's just making the poorest just eat each other up and make them struggle so that they can continue to pass it.
And having so many jobs where there is not a living wage. So they get this opportunity to, like you said, earn this life-changing money,
Yep.
you know?
And it's wrong. It's
It's a
not
game,
right.
but it's a
Doesn't
game
make it-
changer for them. Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, on the heels of some kind of dark topics, what's giving you hope right now?
Wow. Well, and I think this is giving maybe everybody hope, the fact that summer is right around the corner. It's giving me a lot of hope. I'm hopeful that we'll have a calmer summer, maybe quieter summer, maybe less violent summer. That's giving me a lot of hope because, like so many people in our state, I also struggle with seasonal depression and the winter and the blues and the chaos.
Same. Yeah,
Somebody-
it's hard.
Well, I hope you do get that calm summer and the hope spring, summer. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to hear more about your work, your perspective, the role you're playing in shaping Minnesota's future. And I have to say, as a mom of 3 Gen Zers, I'm just so impressed with you. And thank you for what you're doing.
100%. 100%. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to meet with you and speak with you because it's clear that a new generation of leadership is stepping forward. And whether or not we agree on policy, these conversations matter. And they help us better understand where we're headed and how decisions are being made. So, Senator Mohamed, thank you again for joining us today. Again, it was an honor and a privilege to have you here. It was a fabulous conversation. I enjoyed myself. Even though I've been taming my dog this whole time. I'm trying to keep him from barking and jumping in my face. But thank you so much for putting up with us with our little bit of swearing on the podcast, too. We just can't help ourselves. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you. This has been so fun. I really appreciate you guys for having me. I had a good.
Yay, then come back. We want you back again.
Yeah,
I'll be back. If we get
Yay.
Sullivan's back, we'll be back and have a good update.
that would be great.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we sign off, either one of you?
I appreciate you so much for having me on a Friday afternoon.
We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day. We know that you're busy and it means a lot to us. We never, ever lose sight of the fact that you guys are so busy. You have so much on your plate. We're always just really grateful. And so thank you.
You too. Always happy to do it.
To our listeners, if you're finding meaning in the conversations we're having, if something challenges you, informs you, sparks a new perspective, please like, comment, and share. It helps us grow.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Substack, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Keep shining your light in the dark. Help us find each other.
And remember, we're stronger together.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks so much.